just explain the work that we've done together on this, this initiative.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you for inviting us to this meeting. We're not going to vote on this bill because it is assigned to county affairs. But since it does involve us, thought we'd be here for the questions, any questions or explanation of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. Since this is the same process for reimbursement for cities and counties, we did combine it into one bill. And what you have in front of you is a committee sub, but the only change from the original bill that was filed online in the committee sub is the amount of admin fees to the agency to administer the program. Basically, what the Senate bill does is it allows MDA, Mississippi Development Authority, to administer the reimbursements to both cities and counties, to all local governments. It prescribes that MDA create a form for the counties and cities to fill out for their reimbursements, and that they would be able to provide receipts, invoices, any type of proof of expense with their application to MDA, and that any expense that is within those CARES Act guidelines now, and if they were to change, those expenses would be eligible for reimbursement. The Treasury has not changed those guidelines, but if they do, there is a provision in this bill that says that they would be able to change the way that they were reimbursed according to any changes in the CARES Act guidelines. The bill prescribes what eligible expenditures do not include on lines 122. They do not include the state share of Medicaid, damages covered by insurance, payroll or benefit expenses for employees whose work duties are not substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to COVID health emergency, expenses that have been or will be reimbursed by any other federal program, and that would include FEMA, such as the reimbursement by the federal government pursuant to the CARES Act of contributions by states to state employment funds, reimbursement for donated items or services, workforce bonuses or other hazard pay or overtime, severance pay, legal settlements, or any other expenditure determined to be ineligible by the Treasury. So Section 3 gets down into the meat of how this is prescribed, and we thought that if we did it step by step, that would be easier for the agency, but still give them the authority to administer the program. They can promulgate rules and regulations. They're supposed to create a written form for each county or municipality to submit. They're to inform each county and municipality of its portion of the funds set aside under Section 5, inform them the definition of eligible expenditures versus ineligible, which I've just explained. We have put a date in here for the agency to begin making initial disbursements to the counties and cities, a date of August 15, 2020, so that we know that it won't drag on and on and on. And I have spoken to the agency, and they have not indicated that they cannot comply with that, so that they will get this application out there in time for these counties and cities to be able to get their stuff together. But we've been telling them, get your ducks in a row, get everything that you need ready to submit your expenditures. Continue to accept and reimburse rolling applications after August 15. So if a county or city made their application August 15, got some reimbursements, and continued to have expenses, as long as there's money left in the fund, they could submit another expenditure after that date. Line 150, well, it's not line 51. Yeah, probably still is on the committee sub. I'm looking at my original bill I had highlighted. The authority may retain up to $100,000 of funds available under this act to administer the program. That was the only change. We had initially put 50, and we changed that to 100. So to be eligible, Section 4, Section 4, certified application to the authority. So they're going to have to certify that all is true and good. Original itemized receipts and or invoices of purchases and services paid by the county or municipality, or the substantiated equivalent thereof as determined by the authorities. specific job description of and rationale for any work performed by an employee who received hazard pay. And what we did in section 5 to make sure that the bigger counties and cities did not suck up all the funds is we put a provision in here that basically said we will set aside a pro rata share of the total for each municipality or county based on population, so that we will make sure that these small or counties and municipalities have some money in the fund to utilize up to that amount. And it's not going to guarantee them a check for that pro rata share, but it will protect that money for them up to that amount. And if they don't have enough reimbursement expenses to get up to that amount, any city or anything that's not spent will go back into a fund. Will go back to actually go back to the governor. So if on November 30th, if you'll go on down in the bill, if on November 30th, 2020, there are unobligated monies in either fund, including any undispersed portion of a county or municipality's pro rata share, the governor shall have the discretion to transfer monies to another state agency for eligible CARES Act expenditures, or the governor could choose to continue to reimburse till the 31st of December. The funds will be subject to audit both by the Treasury's Office of Inspector General and the Mississippi State Auditor. That's in section 6 of the bill. Any municipality or county found partially compliant or fully non-compliant with the requirements shall return to the state all or a portion of the funds received. So we just want to make sure that we that all these all these counties and cities have their receipts and have their ducks in a row and understand what can be reimbursed and what can't, because we don't want to have to go back and claw back any money that was ineligible. It also requires a report to the legislature by the agency by October 1st, 2020, and that would coincide with the date that we may potentially be back up here if things change. So that's why we put that date in there in section 7. So that the authority will report, you know, who has gotten money and how much, and the total reimbursement by that date, and how much we may have left. This basically has a severability clause that if anything is found to be invalid or in violation of federal law in this bill, the remaining sections will still be in force. That's in section 8. And it will take effect after passage, because we will need this to go ahead and take effect so that Mississippi Development Authority can go ahead and start getting ready to process these applications. So that's basically an explanation of the bill, and the money that will be put in this will be done through appropriation. This is just a vehicle that prescribes the reimbursement process for the cities and counties. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions. Senator Jordan? Yes.
How much money total was set aside for the municipalities?
That is not in this bill, but basically the last numbers that I heard were somewhere in the $40 to $50 million range for the counties, and I think around 80 million for the cities. That's the last number that I heard, but that's going to be subject to what Senator Hobson and them do. But we have been looking at what their requests are, and we're trying to comply with what they're asking us to be able to provide to them.
Is that's for both, for counties and municipalities, or just?
Well, there'd be a separate amount for each, because the counties.
I know, but the total amount I'm concerned about, how much?
The total amount, I can't give you the exact total amount yet, but it's basically what they're telling us that they need is what we're going to try to provide for them.
Have they presented their forms to?
Yes, we've been in contact with Sherry and also with Derek Surratt throughout this process. And as of last week, we were looking at the numbers that they thought that they needed, and that's the direction that we're headed. They've kind of taken a poll of the cities and counties, and they've kind of given us an idea of what they think that they need. But like I said, this is going to require them to provide the receipts, the payroll descriptions, and any other monies that they have to be reimbursed would have to go in along with the federal Treasury guidelines.
Well, I noticed that the agency who MML people here of the week, and I guess somebody from who represents the boards of supervisors.
Right.
So they have sent forms to them.
Yes, Mississippi Development Authority will create a form that each municipality and county will be able to utilize to request that reimbursement.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Sojourner?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Hill. How much federal money has been allocated or is available through application programs to counties or cities to reimburse them for some of these functions listed under Section 2?
I can't answer that, but this bill says that they will not be reimbursed for anything that could be reimbursed by another federal program. So I can't tell you exactly what FEMA would reimburse because I haven't studied the FEMA. I've looked at what the Treasury guidelines say for the CARES Act, but there are probably some differing expenses that FEMA would reimburse, but this bill says that they cannot double dip.
Can we get a list of what federal reimbursements are based upon as compared to what is in this bill, what we will be willing to reimburse?
This bill right here follows the Treasury guidelines. It basically rewrites the Treasury guidelines incorporated into the bill for what we can reimburse through the state.
So if this bill follows the Treasury guidelines and outlines what we can reimburse for, are you saying that that also follows the guidelines of what the feds can reimburse for?
Well, I think that FEMA may have some separate guidelines from what I've just heard, that there may be some things that they can get reimbursed for through FEMA that maybe, I haven't looked at it, but what we did and what our attorney did was we basically went verbatim through the CARES Act language and incorporated into this piece of legislation so that we know that we're compliant with CARES Act with what we reimburse and that we will not duplicate anything that's reimbursed by any other federal program.
So I guess when we do the application to the counties and the cities and ask for their receipts, we will also ask for documentation as to what they may or may not have been reimbursed from the feds for.
That would be up to MDA, but it's clear in this bill that they should not reimburse for something that's already been reimbursed.
But should we not send some level of direction to MDA? Because if that is not required, there's no way to know.
Well, and that's a good point, and I feel like once this bill hits the House, it'll probably wind up in conference because I highly doubt that they will agree with everything in this bill, and that is a point that I am more than happy to incorporate into the final piece of legislation.
Is there no limit, if you look under Section 2 at some of the broad variety of stuff, you know, even it says facilitate distant, line 91. Expenses to facilitate distance learning, including technology improvements in connection with schools to enable with compliance. Well, we passed a $150 million bill on Friday.
Exactly.
To do just that.
Exactly, and they cannot use money that we would provide through the county and city bills to duplicate what would be passed through the education bill.
I know Senator DeBar made in his comments to one of my questions, I asked if the schools already said, let's say the schools already had iPads in the 9th grade. Our bill said on Friday that they could use the bill to purchase iPads, and he said, well, then they could use it for connectivity or something else. So it seems to me like this would actually provide a third bite at the apple, possibly a fourth bite at the apple, because you have the education money coming from the feds, you have federal money coming to the counties and cities, we now have education money coming from the states, now we have education money, or we have money coming to the counties and municipalities that all are available under the same parameter. So I just...
That's why we put in the bill that this particular vehicle cannot reimburse for any money spent under any federal program for the same thing.
Exactly, but I don't see that there's language in here that provides exactly what that accountability measure would be.
And I just said that I don't have any problem because we do not want people to be submitting one receipt here that they got paid for and another receipt. And if they're willing to do that gamble and be subject to Shad White looking into how they spent this, then, you know, they might be braver than I think they are. But we will certainly, when this gets to conference, we will certainly look into that to make sure that there is some oversight as to whether or not they, and that's why I said they've got to put receipts in here. The House bill is totally different than this. This bill is much stronger and it is much tighter than what the House bill is. And the House bill also goes through DFA, not MDA, and requires a lot of other stuff like an Office of Pandemic Preparedness. There's a lot of stuff in the House bill that's not in this bill. Tried to write this bill as tight as I could. And like there are the guidelines in there that say you can't get doubly reimbursed, but if we want to put some type of, some tighter language in there, I'm open to that.
Well, I would first of all like to say, I mean, I do appreciate, I know in the 5 years I guess I've served with you now, you've certainly been one of the more fiscal hawks in looking after people's taxpayer money and accountability. But given this unusual circumstance that we're in, where there seems to be money falling off trees that I had no idea it grew on, I'm a little bit skeptical of what we're providing where and how. So I don't know what the appropriate time is, because I'm not sure. I guess we're not voting on this bill today.
We are. The County Affairs Committee is voting on this bill today. We have invited
offer
municipalities to come and ask questions. This
Okay.
bill goes through County Affairs.
So if we were going to offer amendments, I guess the time to do that would be in here now then.
Or on the floor.
Or on the floor. One other question. In each of these items listed in Section 2, is there a dollar amount limit that can be reimbursed for any of these subsections or each of these items? Or is it just whatever they can provide receipts for?
There is no limit to each individual item, because counties and cities have spent money on different things. They have different needs, but they will have to provide a receipt or an invoice, and it will have to comply with those CARES Act guidelines.
Okay, so I'm just...
And MDA, it'll be up to MDA to vet those expenditures.
So in trying to do a little math, we had 1.25 billion. We've spent 450 plus 50, I guess, is 500. We know we've got an MDES issue. We're hearing lots of numbers thrown around about what we're going to do for broadband. We still have no idea what the fall is going to bring. And now it appears that this bill, at the very least, could be the $120, $150 million range based on speculation. Is
It could be, and I think that the numbers that the counties and the cities have brought back to us have looked fairly conservative, in my opinion, as to what they have spent during this pandemic.
And I guess I would just close with this. You're certainly aware of the economic impact the last few months have had on small businesses.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that you and everyone else in this room has heard from your constituents, like I have, of the hundreds and thousands of examples of businesses in this state that got left out of that small business relief money. Are we not concerned about not doing more for the business community, because that is the tax driver that funds our
I'm very concerned about the business community, and that's one reason why that I want to make sure that eligible expenses to cities and counties get reimbursed, because the last thing that any business needs is a property tax increase.
Agreed. Thank you, Senator Hill, for your work.
Senator Turner, Ford.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
The last regulation that I saw from the Department of Treasury said that there should be a, I guess, an effort to spend 45% or expend 45% of the CARES Act funds to municipalities and counties. Has that changed?
Basically, what the CARES Act guidelines are, that how the money can be spent, is incorporated into this bill, and they left it up to the states as to how to spend it. You do not have to spend that much on municipalities and counties. Our counties and cities have not even asked for that much. So that's kind of where we are on that.
And in terms of these, going back to Section 2, if, for instance, a municipality or a county has actually expended sums of money to facilitate distance learning during school closures, would there be an issue with that entity receiving reimbursement?
If they're reimbursed, if they are reimbursed by another federal disbursement, it could not be paid for twice for the same expenditure.
What other federal reimbursement would be allowed, especially for the
Well,
distance learning?
There was some money sent directly to the Department of Education to be dispersed to the schools, and the last meeting that I was at, and it may be updated by now, they did not have the guidelines as to what that exactly could be spent on. And that was something that came directly to the Department of Education to be dispersed to the schools.
And it's my understanding that what the Department of Education was requiring from local school districts is that they present a plan going forward for how they would expend the amount of money that was allocated to them. So is that the understanding that that money was for reimbursement, or is it to implement a distance learning?
That money was just for the Department of Education to give them directly. That was not part of this. That was a different pot of federal money.
So I guess my question is, what pot of federal money would have been allocated or appropriated to school districts such that money spent for distance learning could be considered as double dipping?
If they would try to submit receipts for something that they already got paid for, either by the direct appropriation to the Department of Education from the feds, or from the bill that Senator DeBar passed through the body and actually tabled the motion this morning, or this money. And there may be other, but basically what the feds did not intend us to do is to basically reimburse for one expense more than one time. Now, if they had one receipt here for something and they got reimbursed, or they paid for it through Senator DeBar's legislation, and then they had something else that they needed to do, and they're a county entity that the county feels like they should be able to pay for that, then that's two separate things.
I understand that all counties belong to the Mississippi Supervisors Association.
That's right.
And so they've received the requirements to submit their proposed COVID-related expenses.
Right.
What about municipalities? Do they all belong to MML?
I don't know if they do or not. Whether they belong to MML or not, they will still be able to take this receipt, this form through Mississippi Department of Mississippi Development Authority form, and use it if they're a local government.
So do you know if MML is submitting this information to those non-member municipalities for them to submit their COVID-related expenses also?
I cannot answer that, but what I can answer is that if they're looking for reimbursement, as soon as this bill passes, and they will know that MDA is where that they go. I mean, just like the small businesses, they had to know to go to MDA, and we have to make it known to them to go to MDA. And like I said, there is a pro rata share set aside based on population of whatever that total amount is, so that city or municipality will have money reserved that can't be usurped by another entity if they're slower to get their stuff together.
And my last question is, I understand that MDA will be, I guess, developing the program and determining what the criteria would be to apply. Would MDA be in a position to implement restrictions or more restrictions than what's included in whatever bill comes out of the legislature?
I don't think so, because they have to follow these guidelines as subject to audit.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Senator Hill, I do have an amendment that I would like to offer at the appropriate time.
What is your amendment?
So I would like to say, and I was talking to Jeff, I'm not sure of the exact language, but when we are requiring counties to provide receipts and documentation, I would also like for the counties to have, and the cities to have to provide documentation on any federal CARES Act money they have received, or documentation on any federal CARES Act money they may have applied for, just to give us a way to cross-reference what they are asking for via their receipts and what they've already received from the feds.
I don't have a problem with that amendment.
Question on the amendment. Where are the,
Senator Jackson? Yes, question?
Question about the amendment. The municipalities on the MML were not asked the same thing as the counties were, reference to their receipts?
Yes.
Yes, sir, Senator Jordan, asking both the cities and the counties.
Well, that was prior to your amendment that you offered?
Yes, the amendment that I'm offering would just ask the cities and the counties, when they submit their receipts to the state, that they also submit documentation that shows any federal funds that they have also received for those.
For COVID-related expenses?
Yes, for COVID related.
That they received prior to
Monies they have received prior to submitting their receipts for state funding, or also documentation of money they may have applied for.
not about COVID-19?
Just for COVID-19 related expenses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I think that's fine, and I think it's probably already covered, but whenever the counties and the cities have to certify that application, they're going to have to certify that they're not being doubly reimbursed. But I don't have a problem with them disclosing as a matter of record and clarity, and I think that would probably even help MDA in their processing of the applications. And we're going to make sure that that's not something that's tedious and lengthy, but we will certainly put that in, if the committee prefers, we can just say that they would have to just give a brief description of federal funds already received through CARES Act, and any other applications for CARES Act funding for COVID-related expenses. Do I have a motion on that amendment?
Motion.
So, but the only problem I've got with the applied for is we apply for a lot of things people get. At what point do we say, well, the NBA has the authority to make that designation? That's my only concern, is we've got a lot of money that's not getting there. We applied for, our small business applied for, they didn't get. So we're gonna hold that against them just because they applied for
This
it?
is not small business. This
I
is,
understand that,
yeah.
but I'm just saying as an example.
It's a point well taken. And so maybe the language just says that they include documentation of monies received. And then, at some point, if the counties receive additional money from the feds for money we've already given them, I'm not sure what the accountability line is
I think
there.
all we can do is say for monies already received for COVID-related expenses.
So we can do, yeah, that makes sense.
Have a motion for the amendment?
Motion.
All in favor? Any opposed? The amendment carries. Any other questions? Do I have a motion on the committee sub? All sufficient do pass committee sub. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank y'all so much. Rise and report. Do I have a motion to rise and report? Tyler? Committee sub as amended. Any opposed? Everybody's like, whatever you want. Whatever you want.